I never thought a book club would turn into the kind of night that changes everything, but here we are, me and this guy named Sam, the only two who showed up to a meeting that was supposed to have at least 10 people. The rest had bailed or ghosted or whatever, but honestly, it felt like fate more than flakeout. I mean, how often do you get stuck with just one other person for an hour, and suddenly it doesn't feel awkward at all? So picture this. It's a Thursday evening, the kind that drags because the weekend is still a couple of days away, and I'm sitting in this cozy little cafe downtown, nursing a lukewarm coffee that I wasn't even sure I wanted in the first place. I'm thinking about how I got roped into this book club by a coworker who promised it'd be fun and chill, but as the minutes ticked past the start time, I just started scrolling through my phone, half expecting to be the only one showing up. And wouldn't you know it, I was right. Then, just as I'm about to pack up and call it a night, in walks Sam. He's the kind of guy who you notice right away. Not because he's screaming for attention or anything, but because there's something calm and confident in the way he moves. Tall, with those messy dark curls that look like he just rolled out of bed, and these green eyes that don't miss a thing. He spots me, gives this small, almost apologetic smile, and says, "Guess we're it, huh?" I laugh, trying to make it less awkward than it feels. Yeah, looks like it. I was starting to think I'd be talking to myself. He pulls up a chair without hesitation, and that's when the night actually starts feeling interesting. We kick off by discussing the book. It's a collection of short stories I wasn't super into at first, but Sam's got this way of talking about the characters like they're people he's known forever. I find myself listening more than talking, which is weird for me because I usually don't shut up, especially when I'm nervous. There's this moment when he laughs at one of the stories, and it's not just polite, it's genuine, and something clicks. Like, I want to hear more from him, not just about the book, but about anything. What surprises me is how quickly the conversation drifts away from the book and settles into more personal territory. Favorite music, weird hobbies, the stupid things we did as kids. Sam's easy to talk to, and for once, I'm not worried about sounding dumb or saying the wrong thing. It's like we're just two people who happen to get stuck in the same tiny group, and that's kind of perfect. By the time we realize the cafe is about to close, no one else has shown up, and the meeting is basically over, I'm not ready to say goodbye. But I also don't want to push it and feel lame, so I just say, "Hey, maybe next time we get the whole group back, huh?" He smiles, and it's like the whole room gets warmer. Yeah, or maybe just us. And that's when I know this night was never really about the book. I laughed a bit nervously, like maybe I was reading too much into his words, but there was something in the way Sam said it, soft, almost like a challenge or a promise, that made me want to push past the usual boundaries. So I started clearing my throat like I suddenly had 1,000 things to say but no clue where to begin. "What do you usually do on a Thursday night if you're not rescuing lonely book clubs?" Sam grinned, leaning back in his chair like he was settling in for a story. "Honestly, mostly nothing exciting. I'm a bit of a homebody. Books, bad TV shows, the occasional video game binge. But what about you?" "You don't strike me as a nothing exciting type." I shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed by his straightforwardness, but also kind of relieved. I guess that depends on the day. Most nights I'm just crashing after work, trying to pretend the world doesn't exist for a few hours. But I do like the idea of hanging out with people who don't just want to complain about work or talk about reality TV. "Fair," he said, nodding. "I get that. It's hard to find genuine conversation sometimes." There was this honesty in his voice that made me want to dive deeper, so I did. "What's something most people don't know about you?" Sam's eyes flicked away for a second, then back to me. I'm probably way more sentimental than I let on. Like, I keep a box of letters I wrote when I was a teenager. Embarrassing stuff, but it's like a weird time capsule. I smiled, imagining this tough-looking guy carrying around a box of old letters. That's honestly kind of amazing. I'm the exact opposite. I can barely keep a journal, let alone letters. We both chuckled, and that easy vibe between us started to feel less like a coincidence and more like something that had been waiting to happen. The cafe was nearly empty now, the barista glancing at us with a mix of boredom and mild curiosity. "So," Sam said, "what happens next time? If we actually show up for the book club again?" I shrugged, but I felt a little spark of hope. "Maybe we don't wait for the rest of the group. Just keep this going on our own." He smiled, the kind of smile that reaches his eyes and makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. "I'd like that. We exchanged numbers before we parted ways that night, and I remember walking out into the crisp air feeling lighter than I had in weeks. It wasn't just about the book or the club. It was about this unexpected connection that neither of us saw coming. Over the next few days, we started texting. At first, it was pretty casual. Recommendations for new books, funny memes, the usual stuff, but then it slowly became more personal. He'd ask how my day was, I'd ask about a weird hobby he mentioned. We learned about each other's quirks, the little things that make someone who they are. One night, about a week after that first meeting, I got a text from Sam out of the blue. Got tickets for a poetry reading downtown tomorrow. Thought you might want to come. No pressure. I was surprised. Poetry readings weren't exactly my scene, but I found myself saying yes before I even thought about it. Something about hanging out with Sam made me want to step outside my comfort zone. The night of the reading, we met outside a tiny, dimly lit venue with exposed brick walls and candles flickering on the tables. Sam looked different in the soft light. Less casual, more thoughtful. He held my jacket when I shivered from the chilly spring air, and I realized I wasn't just cold because of the weather. Inside, the poet spoke in rhythms that twisted and turned, some quiet and raw, others loud and theatrical. I watched Sam's face light up with every line, and I felt this strange mix of admiration and nervousness. I wanted to be part of whatever made him come alive like that. After the reading, we found a small coffee shop that was still open, and for hours we talked, not just about books or poetry, but about dreams, fears, the things we usually keep to ourselves. The conversation flowed easily, like the kind you hope for but rarely get. At one point, Sam reached across the table, brushing his fingers against mine. It was such a simple gesture, but it made my heart race in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't pull away. Instead, I laced my fingers with his, and just like that, something shifted. We walked home together that night, our hands still entwined, neither of us in a hurry to say goodbye. When we reached my doorstep, I looked up at him, the streetlight casting a soft glow around his face. Tonight was really good, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Yeah, he replied, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of my hand. I'm glad you came. Before I could overthink it, I leaned in, and he met me halfway. The kiss was gentle and a little tentative, but it felt like the most natural thing in the world. When we finally pulled apart, he grinned. Guess the book club wasn't the only thing that took a weird turn. I laughed, feeling this warm, buzzing feeling that's hard to describe but impossible to ignore. For the first time in a long time, I didn't mind that plans fell through or expectations changed. Because sometimes, the best stories start when you least expect them. And with the right person, even a deserted book club can feel like the beginning of something new. After that night, things seemed to pick up momentum faster than I was ready for. In a good way, though. We started hanging out more, sometimes intentionally, like grabbing coffee or checking out that new indie film Sam was raving about, and sometimes just by chance, like bumping into each other at the local bookstore or the little vinyl shop down the street. It felt like the universe had this weird way of pushing us together. One rainy Saturday, Sam invited me over to his apartment for a book and pizza night, which sounded like the best kind of low-key plan. I showed up with a battered copy of some novel he'd mentioned, and he was already there, sitting on the floor surrounded by piles of books and empty pizza boxes, looking surprisingly comfortable in his messy space. The smell of fresh basil and tomato sauce filled the air, and I realized how much I liked being somewhere that felt so personal. We settled in with our books, but of course, it didn't take long before the reading gave way to talking. I found myself opening up more than usual, telling him about my messy childhood, my attempts to make sense of things, and the ways I'd always felt like I was watching life from the sidelines. Sam listened without interrupting, his gaze steady and kind. You're not on the sidelines, you know, he said softly after a while. You just didn't realize you were in the game. That stuck with me. I could feel the weight of those words lingering, like something I needed to hear more than I'd admit. Later that night, as the rain tapped against the window, Sam put on some music, quiet, soulful stuff, and we ended up sitting close, shoulders touching. There was this warmth that wasn't just from the heater or the pizza. It was something between us, growing slower but steady. At some point, without really planning it, I reached out and brushed a stray curl off his forehead. His eyes met mine, and the room seemed to shrink around us. I was nervous, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned in, and this time the kiss was different, deeper, more certain. I could feel his hand on my cheek, steadying and tender. The next morning, when I woke up on his couch, with the sun streaming in, I felt this strange mix of happiness and anxiety. Part of me wanted to stay wrapped up in that bubble forever, but the other part wondered what came next. Were we just two guys who happened to find each other when no one else showed up to a book club? Or was there something real here? I got up, made some coffee, and found Sam in the kitchen, looking like he'd been up for hours. We didn't say much at first, just shared that quiet morning comfort. But then he looked at me and grinned. So, he said, "What do you think? Another book club meeting tomorrow? Or should we just write our own?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. Definitely our own. Over the following weeks, our impromptu book club became a thing. We met regularly, just the two of us, exploring new books, sharing stories, and learning how to be a part of each other's lives. It wasn't always perfect. There were moments of awkwardness, misunderstandings, and fears, but it felt honest. One evening, as we were walking home after a late-night coffee run, Sam stopped and pulled me close. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Can I be honest about something?" I nodded, suddenly feeling the flutter of nerves again. "I'm scared, of messing this up, of getting too close and then losing it." I took a breath, feeling a surprising calm wash over me. "Me too, but maybe that's part of it. If it's worth it, we don't let the fear stop us." He smiled, relief and hope mixing in his expression. We stood there for a moment, wrapped in the night and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we were exactly where we were supposed to be. That's when I realized sometimes the best stories aren't written in books. They're lived, one small, messy moment at a time. After that night, things settled into a rhythm that felt both new and kind of comforting, like finding a favorite song you forgot you loved. Sam and I kept pushing our little two-person book club forward, carving out time between work and the usual chaos. Sometimes it was just coffee and a quick chat. Other times we'd get lost in debates about characters or plot twists, and occasionally we'd wander off topic for hours, exploring everything from music to the weirdest dreams we'd ever had. One chilly evening a few weeks in, Sam invited me over to his place again, this time promising a, quote, movie marathon with an emphasis on terrible 80s flicks. I showed up with a bag of snacks and a sense of anticipation that felt almost ridiculous, but totally genuine. There was something about those nights that made me look forward to the future, even when the present was messy. We settled on the couch, the flickering TV casting shadows on the walls, and I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in a long time. Midway through a particularly cheesy action scene, Sam glanced over at me, his expression soft. He said, "I never thought I'd be this into a book club that doesn't actually have a club." I laughed, nudging him playfully. "It's exclusive. Very rare." He grinned but then shifted, his tone growing quieter. "Can I ask you something? How do you feel about us?" My heart skipped, and I wasn't sure if it was the popcorn or the way he said it. I looked down at my hands for a moment, then back up at him. "I'm really into this," I admitted. More than I expected. It's weird, right? Meeting like this out of nowhere and suddenly caring about someone this much. Sam nodded, reaching out to tuck a stray curl behind my ear. Not weird at all. It's the stuff that sneaks up on you that's usually the best. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that made me want to say all the things I'd been holding back. Instead, I leaned in and kissed him, slow and sure, feeling like this was where I was supposed to be. Things didn't magically become perfect after that. Life still threw curveballs, work stress, family stuff, the usual uncertainties, but having Sam made the tough parts easier to bear. We learned how to argue without breaking, how to be patient when one of us needed space, and how to celebrate the small victories together. One afternoon, Sam invited me to a gallery opening his friend was hosting. I wasn't really into art, but I said yes because, well, I wanted to see what made him light up, like he did when he talked about his passions. The gallery was this bright, airy loft filled with paintings and sculptures, and Sam introduced me to his friends with this easy confidence I admired. Watching him in his element made me catch my breath sometimes. After a while, we found a quiet corner and he pulled me close. "This," he said, gesturing around, "is a little scary for me, but having you here makes it better." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I'm glad you invited me." That night, as we walked home, the city lights shimmering on wet pavement, I felt this deep sense of belonging, not just to the place or the people, but to Sam, and through him, to something bigger than myself. A few days later, I got a text that caught me off guard. "Can I come over? Need to talk about something." I didn't hesitate. When I got to his apartment, Sam was pacing, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. I sat down beside him, waiting. "Okay." He started, "This might sound crazy, but I've been offered a job in another city. It's a great opportunity, but it means moving away." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me wanted to laugh, like this was some plot twist from a bad romance novel, but the reality was heavy. "You're serious?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded, eyes searching mine. "Yeah, and I don't know what to do. I don't want to leave you, but this is a chance I can't ignore." For a moment, the room felt impossibly small. I thought about the way my heart had started to beat faster whenever he was near, the way our lives had intertwined so suddenly and deeply. "What if we tried long distance?" I offered, even though my voice was shaky. Sam gave a sad smile. "I want to believe that could work, but I'm scared it might just tear us apart." We didn't have answers that night, just a lot of quiet and some tears. But as I left his apartment, walking through the streets under the cold night sky, I realized that whatever happened next, what we'd built, was real. And sometimes real means taking the hardest risks, even when you're terrified. That week was a blur of uncertainty. We talked endlessly, weighing options, sharing fears, trying to imagine a future that didn't involve saying goodbye. I found myself staring at my phone, waiting for his texts, every ping sending a mix of hope and panic through my chest. Then, one afternoon, Sam showed up at my door unannounced, holding a small wrapped package and that familiar nervous smile. "I made a decision," he said simply. I opened the gift, a leather-bound notebook, blank pages waiting for stories. "I'm staying," he said, voice steady. "At least for now, because some stories are worth fighting for." I wanted to laugh, cry, and kiss him all at once. Instead, I just pulled him into a hug and whispered, "Me too." After that moment, things didn't suddenly become perfect or easy, if only life worked like that. But there was a new sense of clarity between us, like we'd chosen to build something together instead of letting it unravel. That notebook Sam gave me, I carried it everywhere. It became our little project, a place where we wrote down memories, quotes from books, ideas for trips, and sometimes just random thoughts. It was silly in a way, but it made everything feel tangible, like we were writing the story of us one page at a time. One weekend, a couple of months after Sam decided to stay, we planned a day trip to this little town about an hour outside the city. I don't know why, but the idea of escaping the noise and just being together felt like exactly what we needed. We packed some sandwiches, grabbed the notebook, and piled into my beat-up car, windows down despite the cool air. The drive was filled with our usual banter and playlists that made us both laugh or cringe, depending on the song. When we got there, the town was charming in that quiet, sleepy way. Antique shops, a river winding through, people who smiled without rushing. We wandered around, and I found myself watching Sam more than I was looking at the town. There was this lightness to him, a softness I hadn't fully noticed before. At one point, we stopped by a little bookstore, and he pulled out the notebook from my backpack. "Let's write something," he said, eyes sparkling. We found a bench by the river, and opened the notebook. I scribbled a line about how unexpected moments can turn into the best stories, and Sam added a quote from his favorite poet about love and courage. We sat there for a while, just soaking it in, the sounds of water, the rustle of leaves, the way the sun filtered through the clouds. It was peaceful, but there was also this undercurrent of excitement, like we were on the edge of something big without quite knowing it yet. On the way back, the conversation turned more serious, like it often did when the distractions faded. "Do you ever think about the future?" Sam asked quietly. "More than I probably should," I admitted, "but I'm scared sometimes. Of everything changing or falling apart." "Me too," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "But maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now. Maybe it's enough to just be here, together." That felt like permission to stop overthinking, to let the moment be what it was without pressure. I smiled, leaning my head on his shoulder, and for once, the uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like part of the adventure. Back in the city, things settled into a comfortable routine. We kept our two-person book club alive, occasionally inviting a few others from Sam's circle or mine, but mostly it was just us. I started noticing the little things, how Sam would fix me a cup of tea just the way I liked it, or how he remembered the weird trivia I thought I'd forgotten. It was in those details that I felt the most connected, like we were stitching ourselves into each other's lives without even realizing. One evening, a few months later, we were sprawled on the couch with a notebook between us, debating whether to tackle a new book or just binge-watch some series. I was half listening when Sam suddenly sat up, eyes serious. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "Always," I replied, feeling the familiar flutter. He took a breath, then went on. "I've been thinking a lot about where I'm at, with work, with us, and I want to take a step forward." "Like, really?" I blinked, heart racing. "What kind of step?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, and my stomach did a little flip when I saw it was a ticket, plane ticket, to visit my family, he explained. "I've been avoiding it for years, but I want you to come with me. I want you to meet them." I looked up, surprised but touched. "Are you serious?" he nodded, eyes hopeful. "Yeah, it's scary, but I want you there." The idea of meeting his family felt like a huge deal, like a real milestone in whatever this was between us. I realized then how much I wanted to be part of his world, not just in the quiet moments, but in the big ones too. "I'd love that," I said, smiling. He grinned back, the kind of grin that makes you feel like everything's going to be okay. In the weeks leading up to the trip, there was a mix of excitement and nerves. We planned what to pack, talked about how to handle the inevitable awkwardness, and of course, debated which books to bring along. I could tell Sam was nervous too, but in a way that made me want to be braver for both of us. When the day finally came, I felt this strange tale of anticipation and vulnerability. Sitting next to him on that plane, fingers intertwined, I realized that whatever happened next, we were in it together. And maybe that was the point, not just the book club or the books or the city we lived in, but the fact that we'd found each other and were willing to take the next step, whatever it might be. Because sometimes the best stories don't have neat endings. They're messy, uncertain, and full of surprises. But if you're lucky, you find someone to write them with, and that makes all the difference. The moment we landed, everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. The airport was bustling with people, but all I could focus on was Sam beside me, clutching my hand a little tighter than usual. I knew meeting his family was a big deal for him, probably more than I could fully understand, and I wanted to be as steady and supportive as possible. We grabbed our bags and stepped outside into the warm, humid air of his hometown. It was so different from the city, quieter in a way that felt almost foreign to me. The streets were lined with old trees, and the sound of distant dogs barking mixed with the occasional honk of a car. Sam's parents were waiting for us in a little sedan, and the moment he saw them, this nervous energy I hadn't noticed before flickered across his face. They greeted us with hugs and smiles, his mom's eyes bright and welcoming, his dad nodding with that quiet sort of approval that felt like a handshake in disguise. I could tell Sam was trying to play it cool, but there was this undercurrent of vulnerability that made me want to reach out and say, "Hey, it's okay to be nervous." The car ride to their house was filled with small talk. Weather, how the town had changed, the usual stuff. But every now and then, Sam glanced over at me like he was checking in. I nodded back, silently telling him I was with him no matter what. Their house was cozy, filled with old photographs and the scent of something baking in the oven. His mom insisted on giving me a tour, pointing out pictures of Sam when he was a kid, his awkward teenage years, and lots of silly family vacations. I laughed along, feeling like I was getting a glimpse into the pieces that had shaped him. Dinner was a lively affair. His family had this way of making the table feel like the center of the universe. Stories flew back and forth, jokes bounced around, and I found myself swept up in the warmth. Sam's little sister teased him about his bookish boyfriend, and he shot her a mock glare that made me grin. When his dad asked me about my job, I tried to keep my answers straightforward, but I could feel the weight of his scrutiny. Later, as we cleaned up together, Sam pulled me aside, his voice low. "How do you think it went?" I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Honestly, I think your family likes me, maybe too much." He laughed, relief washing over his face. "That means a lot." Over the next few days, I settled into this rhythm. Morning walks with Sam, afternoons spent flipping through his childhood albums, evenings filled with quiet conversations on the porch. We weren't just visitors. We were part of something real, even if just for a moment. One afternoon, while we were exploring the nearby woods, Sam stopped and turned to me. "I've never really talked about this before," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Growing up here wasn't always easy. I felt like I was living two lives, the one I showed my family and the one I kept hidden." I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "Thank you for trusting me with that." He looked at me, green eyes shining with emotion. "It's easier with you." That night, we sat on the porch swing, the sky a blanket of stars stretched overhead. Sam rested his head on my shoulder, and I felt this deep sense of peace. Like for the first time, all the pieces were starting to fit. But as the trip came to an end, the reality of going back to the city, into our separate routines, started to weigh on us. The last morning, we sat quietly over coffee, neither of us wanting to say the things we both knew. Finally, Sam broke the silence. "I don't want to lose this." "You won't," I said, though my voice wavered. "We just have to figure out how to keep writing the story." The plane ride home was quiet, filled with a mix of exhaustion and hope. When we landed, everything felt familiar and foreign at the same time. But holding Sam's hand as we walked through the airport, I knew we'd changed. We'd faced something together that scared us and come out stronger. Back at my apartment that evening, we collapsed on the couch, the notebook open between us. I traced my finger over the pages, filled with memories and plans. "Ready for the next chapter?" I asked. Sam smiled, squeezing my hand. "Always." And just like that, the story kept going, messy and beautiful and ours. The weeks after we got back from his hometown were quieter, but in a good way, like the calm after a storm that leaves the air feeling fresher. We slipped back into our routines, but there was this new layer beneath everything, a sense that we'd faced something real together and come out the other side. The notebook stayed on my nightstand, pages filling up with everything from silly inside jokes to plans for future trips, and little notes scribbled in the margins about how much this all meant. One evening, we found ourselves back at that same cafe where it all started. Just me and Sam, the usual crowd, nowhere in sight. Like the universe kept giving us these moments to press pause and really be with each other. We talked about everything and nothing, and at some point, I realized I wasn't thinking about what came next or worrying about the future. I was just here, present. With him, Sam reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine, and for a second, everything else fell away. I looked into his eyes, the same green that had pulled me in from the start, and I felt this quiet certainty settle inside me. "You know," he said softly, "I'm glad we were the only two who showed up that night." "Me too," I smiled back. "Otherwise, I might never have met you." We didn't need grand gestures or sweeping declarations. It was the steady, everyday moments that made this real. The way he laughed at my terrible puns, the way he remembered my coffee order, the way our lives slowly wove together like the pages of that notebook. Later, when I tucked the notebook away, I realized we weren't just writing a story about us, we were living it. And unlike a book, there was no ending needed, just chapters unfolding, one after another, messy and imperfect, but ours. In that quiet cafe, with Sam beside me and the city humming softly outside, I finally understood what I'd been searching for all along. Not just the escape or the distraction, but something steady and true. The kind of love that doesn't need an audience, that grows from two people willing to show up, even when no one else does.